Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Let's Chat Reality. I'm Michael. Molly is sadly out this week, but I am here to cover another week of Big Brother 28. Quite a week we've had since we last spoke, and here with me to discuss it all is the friend and self-described unpaid intern of one of the house guests this season, Drew Campbell. It is his good friend, JT Williams. JT, how are you?
Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for having me. I am just, always loving to talk Big Brother. So when I got the invite to come here, I was super happy when we were able to, make it work out with our schedules. And I am very, very excited to talk about what might be one of the most exciting houses. I mean, Big Brother pre-juries have been, very exciting the past couple seasons, and this is, no different. But I have a lot of hope for the rest of this season, and that is not what I was saying, 2 weeks ago.
Oh my God, it's crazy. I think back to what we were talking about a couple weeks ago on this podcast, and like I had hope. The first few weeks, I was like, okay, I know it looks like a steamroll, but I still have hope. It's still super early. We don't know what's going to happen. And then there was a week where I was starting to lose that hope a little bit. And then last week, I was like, okay, I think we might have something here. And now it's like, okay, that hope has been realized, and I'm really excited to see what happens for the back half of the season.
Yeah,
But
same.
JT, we always. Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, like, yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think it was like looking like a bit of a rough boot order once we were losing Jason. I know Jason was like so many people's favorite player, but I really do think that after seeing him go and like the house reshuffling in the way that it did, like it really ended up playing out in a way where I think the game is still so wide open. Like they're really, especially as we'll talk about today with the vets game kind of crumbling a bit now. I think that there's so much room for them to play, but I think they went from like just Handy and Devon's the season to there's a lot more work that they're going to have to do, and they could leave as soon as next week, as soon as this week, potentially for Angela. And I know we'll get into that later. Not looking likely, but if some of these other players really start to wisen up, there are shots that can't be taken. So I think that I just love to see a game where it's like everyone's in the mix, and like the best players will rise to the top, and I think that's what we have.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it is the house has completely flipped now. After that first blindside that they did on Red Corner, it's just like from there it just was a complete reset of the game. And I think that I mean we'll get into it, but there's still a little bit of fear that I have that Yash and Kamu can just kind of trade HOHs back and forth and run the game from here on out. But I think that's why what happens on Monday could really, really affect the rest of the game. And I hope that it goes in one direction, but we'll get into all of that. But before we do, and before we get into Drew's game and all of that, JT, I want to focus on you for a little bit. So what we always like to start out with getting our guests reality TV origin stories. So what was like the one show or season of a show that you remember that really like got you sucked into this world?
Yeah, I think I'd have to go back to Big Brother 16, actually. I would have been 12 years old at the time, but I remember seeing this like weird reality show, and my aunt and her husband, my uncle, had been watching Big Brother, and they've been watching since Big Brother 2 live every season. And I just remember, like, I was too young to understand at the time, but it was BB Comics, and I remember seeing like Donnie's comic where he was like the lobster, and I was like, oh, like that's super interesting. It just put Big Brother on my radar, so that 3 seasons later, when I was a little older to be able to understand, I started to watch Big Brother 19. And I didn't really know at the time like what good slash big brother bad Big Brother was. So when I was watching that season, I was so into it, and I was such a casual. Like I was a diehard Cody fan. I renounced that
Oh
stand-up
God,
time.
yeah,
But look, I was beholden to the edit, okay? And he had an amazing edit,
sure.
especially for what would have been 15-year-old JT. So, but what really got me hooked was after so I watched that. I think I then watched Big Brother 20. After the finale of Big Brother 20, Survivor is coming on, and I'm like, okay, I'll stick around and see what the Survivor season has. And that was Survivor David versus Goliath, famously one of the best Survivor seasons ever. And I was immediately hooked. Christian Hubicki was my all-time favorite player, and now that seems to be like a normie take after season 50. Okay, I've been riding with Christian since I would have been 16, and no one can take that one from me. Okay. And so crazy enough, yeah, like I started getting into Survivor, got into Survivor Edge of Extinction, and with Rick and David Wright, I was huge fans. So really full circle for me to have Rick Devens be such a central player of the season, because it was Rick's season that I started watching RHAP and I started playing some of the online games, and that led me to playing some of the real life reality games, and ultimately how I met Drew. So I owe a lot of this to honestly Rick Devens and David Wright and Christian Hubicki. You can kind of tell what the theme of like who my favorite players ended up being, and it was the ones that I like saw myself in. But I've branched out a lot more now. I'm a huge fan, and yeah, I think that kind of just been getting more and more into it, to where now I've seen every Big Brother, every Survivor, every Big Brother Canada, even some Big Brother Australia, Traders, you name it. I've seen pretty much it all.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I can fully relate to that story. Look, I mean, it was I'm a little bit older than you, but it was Eric Stein that really like was the first player that I felt like on Big Brother watching that I could really see myself in, and so I feel like it's a very similar archetype to the Devons and Christians of the world. But yeah, I mean that leads very well into my next question here, because you and Drew met filming Beast Games season one. But that's a cast of like 2,000 people. So how did you two find each other there?
It was pretty crazy. I'm not gonna lie. Essentially, big Beast Games was such a mess, because you can imagine like how difficult we rag on production for like a 16 player season because they can't get their shit together for Big Brother. Imagine what Beast Productions was doing. Never filmed a reality show before. 2,000 people. It was such a mess, and so they like were telling us like 2 weeks before the show that we were on, and they're like, fly to Vegas and we'll help you from there. And we had to like buy our own clothes for it. And so they told us you need to wear sneakers that are all black with no logos, and you need to wear sweatpants that are all black with no logos, and just wear that on the flight there so that people will be able to help you. But what it ended up doing for the cast is like you would walk on a flight and you would be like, okay, what are all these 20 somethings in these ugly clothes, especially for the women, because it's like that, like you can believe like a guy is going to wear something dumb, but like a woman would never wear that. So it was pretty easy to start realizing who the players actually were. And so I formed like a group already on the flight out there of about 8 people. And then Drew and his at the time girlfriend landed around the same time as us. And when we saw them, we just like introduced ourselves. And like I've pretty much been like great friends with both of them since.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's just so crazy that the two of you would just happen to find each other there in such an incredibly large cast. But yeah, I mean, I've heard the stories of some people maybe not having the best experience filming Beast Game season one. But did you have a good experience filming that?
Yeah, I will say, like, everyone has their own story, but mine was very above the board. I was there for the entirety of the Vegas time, which is when the most people complained. And, like, to be clear, like, it wasn't, like, super cushy. Like, they didn't really tell us what was happening. You kind of just flew out, and then they're like, okay, like, you're going to sleep in sleeping bags in the, Vegas Raiders football stadium. And I think one thing that was a little difficult is there was, like, you got fed 3 meals a day, but it was at like certain times. So like, and you couldn't really get an extra meal. Now, to be clear, like it was enough calories for like the average person. If there was somebody who was like a bodybuilder and they were like super hungry, I could totally believe that. But I do think there were some people who thought it was going to be a lot easier. But like, I come from like a Survivor background, as a diehard Survivor fan. So like, if you're getting fed 3 meals a day, getting a sleeping bag, getting snacks and water whenever you want, I found that to be fine. Now, for the people who like weren't getting their medications at the time that they asked for it, I know how that could be like super scary. And they really kind of cleaned that stuff up in the second stage where they flew us out to Toronto. So, my take, and this is, the same one that Drew has had, we had an amazing experience. We made a ton of friends. We would have killed to do it again, and we have no complaints. But like, we kind of leave room for anybody who didn't have that same experience of like, we totally understand that, but, just wasn't what we had.
Yeah, and since then, you and Drew, I know, have done some game shows. America Says, look, Game Show Network is on in my home almost like 24/7. So I'm sure I watched you guys on that episode before even knowing who y'all were. But besides that, did you do any other shows with him besides that one after Beast Games?
No, actually,
Okay.
ironically, yes. I don't know if you're familiar, but there's this whole world out there, and I really, one of the big things I want to do, like in going on these podcasts, like really encouraging the people like me who's like, look, if you're watching like the chat reality podcast with like some random like family friend of Drew Campbell, like you're a diehard Big Brother fan. I just want to encourage like every single person, like get more involved in the fan base. And one of the great ways to do that is one, like going to events like watch parties. I'm sure, especially if you live in a bigger city, there's probably Big Brother or Survivor watch parties for like the live evictions or like the big episodes. Totally go to those. And if you're up for it, there are live reality games where you can literally go to like a park and it's like an all day thing, and you can play Survivor or Big Brother or the Traders, the Challenge, or whatever format you want. And I've made so many friends from that. So when I was saying, like, ironically, yes, like Drew and I did play an LRG together. LRG stands for live reality game. We played the challenge together, and we were like, we came in
Oh.
as like a secret, like we weren't going to tell anybody we knew each other. But then, like, it's hard to, play that off, and so they kind of realized we were together, and then we were working together, and then I like kind of betrayed him, and then he really betrayed me. But I to be clear, I beat Drew in that game. So we did play the challenge together. He got ninth, I got third. And yeah, I think that's the only other real thing we've done. But what Drew and I also did, which is how ultimately Drew comes to be on Big Brother, is after Beast Games, there's a couple of us like that on Beast Games. We're like, yeah, Beast Games is cool, but like this is not like the end goal. The end goal is to get on Survivor or Big Brother. Those are like the big two, and we would do anything to be on that. Now Drew was mostly Big Brother, I was mostly Survivor, but still, like we both loved these shows, and that's why we became so close. And so after the Beast Games ended up wrapping, we created a group chat with some other people who were also really into it. And every single time a reality show application would drop, we would send it in that group chat, and we would just learn like, how do you make these tapes, like how do you do interviews. And so while neither of us until this point, we're ultimately, that's how Drew gets on Big Brother, is that he was doing the casting process for a ton of other shows. I know at least four off the top of my head that he was doing, and one of which had a Big Brother producer as one of their top casting producers, because the casting world is small. Drew gets that guy's phone number, and when he submits his Big Brother application, same day sends the Big Brother like video to the guy and is like, hey, I know that I'm like the perfect choice for Big Brother. Like, you have to put me on this show. And the guy was like, can you do an interview tomorrow? And like from there, he got all the way through casting and ends up getting on the cast. So that was like one of the big things Drew and I had in common. Similarly, I was very close to ending up on the Genius, which is a big Korean show. They did a UK version, and the UK version was a pilot for a much bigger US version. So that
Oh.
still haunts my dreams of like, I loved the Korean version. I was in the casting finals, and they were like, you're totally going to be on. And then they sent like a update, and they're like, hey, this is going to be postponed, but if we ever come back, we'll contact you. And 18 months later, no contact has been made. But almost was on Peacock on the Genius. That would have been a pretty crazy thing for me.
Wow. I had no idea. I watched the whole UK season, and I had no idea that that was going to be a pilot for a US season. But I know that it didn't do very well in the UK ratings wise, which is I'm sure why that US season never happened. But
Unfortunately, yeah.
wow, oh, that would have been so cool. I yeah, that's such a fun show. I really that was I had not seen the Korean version of it, but I loved the UK one. But yeah, wow, I feel like that's such an encouraging story to hear about Drew, because I feel like for Survivor we know that these days it's they don't recruit anymore really, but for Big Brother I feel like a lot of people think like, is it even worth applying, because they just recruit a bunch of people who never seen the show before. And so it's encouraging to know that somebody who actually applied and went through that process that so many people have done and would love to do to get on here, that somebody like that actually ended up getting on. So it's encouraging to hear that, I'm sure, for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. And I know Barrett also had
Yeah.
applied. I'm not sure about everybody else, but I wouldn't be surprised if there were like about half the people apply and then half the people get recruited. That seems to be what it is. But it's like some of the people, like I wouldn't be surprised, like a Lyric who was like a fan of Big Brother, but clearly just wanted to be on reality TV, like just mass applies and then she
Yeah.
gets on. So technically she's not a recruit, but it's more like a recruit. I do know for Drew in the casting process, a big issue for him is like he was crushing, like when he was applying for the Traders, for example, he would crush those interviews because he didn't like the Traders. He thought the Traders was a dumb show. And so he's just going and trying to get reps in, and it didn't feel as serious. But then once he was on like the Big Brother casting, and truly like this is Drew's number one biggest show he's ever wanted to be on, like it meant so much to him. The casting producers literally were like, dude, like what happened? Like I thought you were more like laid back, like energetic, like you seem like way too uptight. And they're like, we can tell this means so much to you. Like you have to find a way to like convince yourself that like this is just super casual, because like they loved him when he was just being himself, but like they felt like he just wasn't as funny in those interviews. So it's very interesting to like kind of have to reach that like zen mode and pretend like you're not in Big Brother casting, because if you are, then you'll be overthinking it. I'm sure we could do an entire 2 hour podcast of like what it takes to get on reality TV. And hey, I
Oh,
need
I'm
to
sure.
know it, because it's like all I want to do is be on these shows right after Drew. But yeah,
Yeah.
super super interesting process.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it has been over 5 weeks now since the season started that you have been watching Drew on these live feeds and on the episodes. What has that been like to watch one of your favorite shows that you've been watching for all these years, and now to have one of your closest friends on there? Are you able to enjoy it, or is it too stressful?
I definitely enjoy it. It's very cool. I mean, I have never been super involved in like the online sphere. Like I've never wanted to like post on Twitter or like do podcasts or anything like this. And so having the platform, and for those who don't know, I am running Drew's Instagram account, and that has been just like a super fun project that I've taken on that has allowed me to just like get another layer of access. I mean, Drew's account probably gets like 50 to 100 DMs a day. I'm looking at I read every single one unless it goes into like the hidden messages because you're too horny, and there are plenty of people who are too horny about Drew. But I read them all. I respond to the interesting ones, and that's been like it's just been super cool to like talk to a ton of Big Brother fans. There's a ton of Big Brother alumni who are in there. It's very weird that I can like just reach out to Rachel Riley and like she'll just respond because I have this Drew account. Whereas if I reached out on my own account, they would never be responding. And everyone's been so nice. So I think that has been one of just like the coolest experiences of like I'm meeting in a way like so many of these people that I've watched forever. Had tons of great conversations, but it is very very different watching the show with like a clear rooting interest in mind, especially because the show is not scripted. So like at least for Survivor, like they can edit it in a way where like they know Christian's going to be like one of the fan favorites, but they also know that he's going to make a deep run and that's going to be satisfying. Whereas like that's the unfortunate part about going on Survivor is like you can play this great game, get swap screwed, go out and be like, oh well, I did everything I could, but there was nothing I could do after swap screw. And then what they're going to do in the edit is make you super unlikable or super invisible, so that when you get swap screwed, the audience is going to be like, yes, I liked it that they were swap screwed because I don't even know who they are. Whereas Big Brother, like there is no edit, there's no edgic, like you have to anything can happen. And there's been plenty of seasons where someone comes out of nowhere, or maybe we realized they were playing a better game but the editors just didn't put them in the show. I'm thinking of Andy Herron from 15, one of the people who I might think be the greatest player of all time. Just got a terrible edit because they just were not focusing on him until it was too late. And that has been, and it's just very hard, obviously, of like there was the week that it looked like Drew was completely done unless he won the blockbuster, and he was talking about should I throw the blockbuster because I'm so safe, and I'm like, dude, that'd be such a terrible way to go out. But honestly, like Drew has been playing like such a like on the ledge type of game where it's like it's looking so good, but like everything could come crumbling down at any minute. And it really took him being put on the block and being completely betrayed by his allies for his game to hit an entire reset, because we saw D really go and be like, wait, why are we actually targeting Drew? Who does this help? And they saw how genuinely of a good guy like Drew is and how loyal he was, and it put a full reset on the vets. They flipped the house. They were like, okay, even though this was our mistake in getting Drew nominated, we're going to completely throw the red corner under the bus, make it their fault, and we're going to save Drew. And I think one thing that's really interesting in these games, and it's something that I learned very early on when I was playing like LRGs and ORGs, was like the best way to get someone to be loyal to you is not to do them a favor, it's to get them to do a favor for you. Because if I do you a favor, what if you it I think like, oh, now you owe me, but you don't like it when you feel like you owe me. You want to feel like you're in control. It's way easier to get people to be loyal to you when they do a favor for you, because now there's the sunk cost fallacy where they're like, well, I've already put so much work into Drew. And additionally, when D and Rick flip the game, save Melody, save Drew, they're like, Drew really owes me. So even if I think he's shady, he owes me so bad that he's going to have to be loyal to me. And he was going to be loyal regardless. But like, perception's a reality in this game. Like, you would much rather have people think you're loyal and not be loyal than to be loyal and they think you're not loyal, which is what we saw with Drew. And so I think that it just lucked out in so many ways that it looked so bad for Drew, but then now it's looking so good that like, is anybody in a better spot than Drew right now? I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone.
No, seriously. I mean, I that is such a wild thing. Think back to like what 2, 3 weeks ago when we all thought that Drew had the coin of destiny and that he wasn't going to use it. Like, could you imagine saying to that person like, a few weeks ago that now he would be in the best position in the game? And it's wild how easily, quickly this game can flip around. But yeah, he's one of the few people who it feels like is trusted on both sides of the house, and it's great. I love to see it because I think for a long time it felt like it was so frustrating because the especially Angela, but really all of the icons just were not trusting him for nothing that Drew was really doing wrong, but just kind of the way his demeanor and the way that he would kind of talk with everybody and kind of he wasn't really playing both sides of the house. He was fully loyal to the icons, but he was having closer relationships with other people, and that was causing them to all be suspicious of him. And we all thought that was going to be his downfall. But now everything flipped, and it feels like that has no bearing on the current state of the game anymore.
I totally agree. And I think that one of the things that I enjoy most about this show, and it's why it's been going on for, 27 years now, is that every single season, and honestly, every single player, you can absolutely learn something from. And especially watching this game so closely, I learned the most from Drew because I'm just so in tune with what's going on. And I think that for future players, and I'm really talking to myself right now because it's like nothing I would want to do more than like go beyond this show, is like,
And you
it,
should. Your mind is so good for this game, and you really do need to be on one of these shows. Sorry to
no,
interrupt.
no, all good, and we will save the clip because it will happen one day, and then people will dig this up, and they'll be like, "Oh, like JT did this podcast, a couple years ago. Like, let's see where his thoughts were." So I'm very, excited. I'm leaving the breadcrumbs for when I
Yeah,
finally get on this
exactly.
show. But what I'm really learning from Drew is that when you're committing to a side, you have to make sure that you're doing the groundwork so that everyone understands what you're doing. And I think that so much of people, but I see the meme on Twitter where people are like, oh, you're mad that people are lying in the lying game. Like, and it's, it's the joke because everyone's lying in Big Brother. But there's so many times that it's far more important to tell the truth than to lie and to make people understand that you're telling the truth. And I think that Drew, what I would have told him if I could, talk to him. It seems like he's doing a good job now, but it's probably, this is the game comes in cycles, and they're gonna hate him again, and then he's gonna, they're gonna realize he's loyal again, and they're gonna keep doing it. Is that Drew needs to be putting more work into these relationships. He needs to talk to, like, he's having these great conversations about Angela, and he's saying it to Melody, and he's like, oh, like, it's so funny because like I thought Angela was this like super disloyal person, but actually I love her so much, and she's so fun, and I'm so glad that I met her. And like, now Angela's more on Drew's side, but he would be having these conversations while she would be in the other room being like, Drew is the devil. I can't wait to backdoor him. I can't wait to, never speak to him again. And it's like, have these conversations with Angela. Have these conversations with Rick of like how much, you see him as like a fatherly figure and how much you like love playing this game. And you can do it in a way that is believable, that these people are really going to understand, okay, like there's just no way that this guy is playing me this hard. And I think you can throw stuff in of like, I came in wanting to find a group of people that I could be loyal to down to the end, because in the recent seasons, that's what you've had to do is lock in with people and ride it out. And like you put it in that way, people are going to see your game. Whereas when they have it in their mind where that Drew's game is be friends with everybody, lie to everybody, and throw every competition so he never has to put his, neck on the line, it makes you seem like a much less useful ally. And so while I think this game has been working well for Drew, he's definitely has so much, rawness to him as a player that he really can, I think, as he's been learning the game, pick up and really fix. But I'm just excited for my friend to come out of the house in a couple months, and I can really just rag on him for every single thing he does. Because let's be clear, this will not be the last time we see Drew on reality TV, and this will be him in his worst form. So I am so excited to see him, get to play, an All Stars or the Challenge or whatever show is going to have him next, because this guy is only going to get better.
Oh yeah, I think there's a challenge call coming. I can 100% see him on there. I think he's the exact archetype that they look for on that show, and I would be very excited to see it because I think he'd be very fun on there. But yeah, no, I agree that it's. I'm excited to see his game moving forward because I do. There's like a one little fear that I have with him right now because both sides really trust him that I do worry that that's not sustainable. That at some point, that when if let's say Haley stays on the block and the Diamond Power veto is used and Kama goes up there, like they will realize from Drew's vote that he is not on their side. And then if that side wins HOH next week, they could be more pissed at him specifically because they thought that he was on their side. So it's more of a betrayal than most other people's votes. And so I do fear that that could then get him on the block. And then, it could potentially kind of go down from there. But right now, I feel like he's in such a good spot that I hope that it stays.
Well, look, I agree, Michael. And here, let me paint you a picture because I've thought this through as well. And here's my, underlying thesis of why this game actually will work. And it goes back to somebody I mentioned earlier in the podcast, and Andy Herron, who was kind of the, inventor of this rat floater type of gameplay, which is that every single time when someone was HOH, Andy had enough information to go to them, just rat out whoever he needed to throw under the bus. And now people are like, okay, like I can work with Andy and I need to target these other people. And the biggest benefactor of this move, of flushing the Diamond Power of Veto, throwing Kamu on the block, taking a shot at Haley or Kamu, who are two of the bigger comp threats, and we'll put a pin in the fact that Drew and I talk about comp threats later, because there's a whole thing that I think people are missing about how Drew's views this game. But who is the biggest benefactor? It's going to be Drew, because even if Kamu realizes, let's say Kamu gets thrown on the block, he wins the blockbuster, and he realizes Drew was going to vote him out, it doesn't matter. You have bigger threats that are coming for you in D and in Devons. And even if you put D, Devons, and Drew on the block, Drew is not going home in that scenario. Because even if, maybe if Devons wins veto, D wins blockbuster, and Drew's up there with Angela, maybe he'll go home there. But it's so many things that have to happen. And what's far more likely is that people are going to be like, I have so many people to deal with. Maybe I can get Drew back on side if I don't nominate him, and I still go after the people who are targeting me. And on the other side, the vets are going to declare war on the house. And we have seen all season, they want nothing more than to take Drew out. I think that Devons will lose his mind if Drew is the one to take him out. Drew doesn't even want to take him out. But if Devons is protecting against, he cannot let Drew play him because he's known that Drew is so dangerous. But by declaring war on the house, Devons and D cannot take a shot at Drew till final 7, because they have so many people who will win and put them up. And Lala even has proven you can't underestimate her and just be like, oh, she'll never win, because she can. That's the beauty of Big Brother, is anyone can win, and it's making people like Drew just fall lower and lower and lower on the target list. And what Drew really just needs is, hey, both sides of the house keep trading off comps, snipe out Barrett or Melody if you have to, but never take a shot directly at Drew. I think they're going to have to. And by Devons really putting himself out on the line, I think it's just going to go next week of if the, Fat plus Icon side wins, that it's going to be Yosh as a backdoor target. And if the other side of the house wins, it's going to be the Icons on the block, and Drew's still not going to be nominated. So he really is in this great position, because
it's so hard for these people when they're going to be at war to be like, let's all put our guns down and just take a shot at Drew instead, because everyone's going to be like, yeah, well, if you do that, then I'm just going to take you out next week. And now you're not even going to have the power. And so to me, I would not want to be in anyone else's position in the house besides Drew's. I think that he is going to have so much more room to play, especially as people are going to need to rely on him for the votes. And if he can just get like good outcomes for blockbuster situations where it's like Haley versus Kamu, and then it's like you had to take out, one of them. It's harder when it's like Angela versus Haley for him to like really have to stab Kamu in the back. But it's like, even if he does, like where's Kamu gonna go? Straight at Devins. So I
Mhm.
think that Drew has so much runway here, and the only thing he has to avoid is people taking a look at Mallory, Melody, Barrett, and Drew and being like, Barrett and Melody are not worth taking out, so we have to take out Drew or Mallory, and then Mallory wins a blockbuster, or Mallory, Drew, and Melody are on the block together, and then if Mallory wins the blockbuster, Drew goes home. I think that is the one scenario he needs to
Yeah.
protect against, and that's why I'm not as upset when people are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he's throwing Melody under the bus. I can't believe he's telling the vets he'd rather lose to them than to Melody, and it's like, guys, like, you really think if Drew's at final 3 and he gets to choose between Devins going to the end with him or Melody, that he's really going to take Devins to the end and lose? Obviously not. He needs to be saying these things to the vets, but he also needs to be putting it out there like, hey, take the shot at Melody. I'm going to be fine. Take the shot at me. Melody is going to be coming after you for the rest of the game. And I think that by making himself an option to all of these different players, they're just going to keep falling for it every time. And we're just going to continue to see Drew skate by.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that this week was really great for FAP. Like it's just it feels like we are going to leave this week with a world war between the red corner, whatever they're going to call the new Kamu, Taylor, Haley, and Yosh group, and then the icons. And I think that that FAP is just going to kind of sit there right in the middle. They're going to be more on the icon side, of course, and it sounds like there's potential for a kind of combining of those groups in the next few days. But it feels like the icons are going to be the centerpiece of that side that the other side's going to go after first, and then FAP is just going to kind of be able to sit there and get kind of lost in the shuffle for the next few weeks at least. And their numbers, that 4 number is going to continue to get more and more powerful, and they're not going to be the targets, but they're just going to be able to kind of grow their influence in the house. And I think that that's going to be really, really great for them for the next few weeks. And I hope that it sticks, because those are certainly the 4 that I am rooting for if the icons are not going to be winning this game. So I'm glad to see that their position has drastically improved in just the last week.
Yeah,
But let's,
absolutely.
yeah,
And I wanted to touch on one other thing, which was what I was
yeah,
saying earlier. And this is a bit about the prep that Drew and I did. And we don't need to get into all of it, but essentially, like, I was the guy, like, for 10 nights straight before Drew left, we called every night for about an hour to 2 hours and talked about our thoughts on the game. And, I know exactly where Drew was thinking going in. And he really relied on me of like, Drew was a big fan. He's seen all of the seasons, but he's seen all the episodes. Like, he was not on Twitter. He was not, watching the RHAP live feed updates or really anything like that. And so there were certain things where like Drew didn't really understand why Vince lost the last game. And I think that that is a lot of casuals' point of view of like, Vince did all of these things and people were kind of just bitter against him. And yeah, he was kind of whiny, but like, I don't really understand. Ashley did nothing. And that's a fair take if you didn't watch the live feeds.
right.
But there was a lot that I was really able to teach Drew about, specifically why Vince had bad jury management and why I would not have voted for Vince in the end. As a person who I consider myself a non-bitter person, I think Ashley just straight up played a better game than Vince. And he really got on board with that. And we actually saw him talking about on the live feeds of like, Ashley played a different game than Vince, but like it was one that is a winning game where Vince was really never going to win that game unless he really just cut Morgan, which I don't believe he would have. But another thing we talked about is the history of Big Brother, really since Big Brother 20, and how the game has been so much about which physical threats are allowed to get to the end and comp out and win the game. And we saw it, most famously with Jag and Matt, who no one was really rooting for. But even if you just go down the line, Casey and Tyler, Holly and Jackson, Cody, Nicole was not as much a physical threat, but she's still, one of the better competitors really of all time. What was it? 23, Kylan and Xavier were trading off. 24, Monty and Turner were trading off. 25, Matt and Jag. 26, Mackenzie and Chelsea. 27, Vincent Morgan. It happens actually every season, and these people aren't fans, so they keep letting it happen. And Drew is not. And that is one thing that I am very impressed, because Drew comes onto this season and we were talking like, hey, you're probably going to be like the third most athletic guy because, like he's in like decent shape, but he's not like a bodybuilder by any means. And then when we looked at the cast, we're like, oh no, you're like the sixth most athletic guy. Like they just made this season so insane between, Rome, Kamu, Chuck, Jason was in great shape. Rick Devon's not in, he's not winning a bodybuilding contest, but he's great at competitions. And then you're left with like Drew and Barrett. Like he was not really in a place where he could dominate. And so one thing I told Drew is every single chance to take out a physical threat is the right chance. Unless they're so loyal to you and going to lose in the end, which is not a safe bet, because as we've seen season after season, the best jury management is just winning competitions. Shout out Jackson Mickey, who they all hated, but they were like, oh, you have to give it to Jackson because he won so many HOHs. And to be clear, I don't think Holly would have been a great winner either, but it's like, stomaching voting for Jackson Mickey would have been just such a drag.
Yeah, no.
You can't bank on even like the Chelsea Mackenzie thing of like, there was a real chance that jury would be dumb enough to be like, oh, like Mackenzie did what she had to do. No, she didn't. And she, won all these competitions. And the fact that she won the competitions proves that she made the right decision. And it's like,
Right.
okay, that's like so dumb. But you just always have to take out these physical threats, because I'm telling you, if Drew and Barrett end up in an endgame with Melody and Angela, they will be trading off comp wins and they will be able to get down to the end. And so that's what I really love about this boot order for Drew is like, really, outside of Ashley losing Rome, losing Jason, even Lyric was, it wasn't exactly what Drew wanted, but Lyric has been doing good in competitions as well. Losing Chuck, now hopefully losing Kamu or Haley, getting Haley, Kamu, and Yash all potentially out pre-jury, meaning that the only opposition is like Lala and Taylor and the vets, who like, look, I think that, D is great at Survivor competitions. We really haven't been seeing it in Big Brother. There's tons of physical competitions like the wall, for example, that Devon's just straight up can't win. And Angela has never been known for competitions. Of course you want to go down to the end game with those people. Now, I hope that Drew realizes if it's like at final 7 and he's choosing between Mallory and Melody or the icons, that at that point you got to take the shot, which I think he's willing to do. But for now, yes, take out Kamu, take out Haley, take out Yash. Anybody who can comp out needs to go, because you saw how long it was, like 2 months straight last season of trying to target Keanu, and they couldn't do it. And they finally took the shot when they had it. But that guy almost won the season and he had no idea what was going on in that house. So you can never underestimate a physical competitor. It's actually impossible, because someone like Yash, who we were all making jokes about being the first boot of the season, is now looking like if they make the right move this week, and this is really what this week is coming down to, is will Yash, who just won HOH, won HOH and just won the veto, is he going to be smart enough to realize, fix your mistake of nominating Haley, take down Haley, nominate Barrett, even with the Diamond Power of veto? I would chicken out if I was Rick. If you look at Angela and Barrett on the block, those are who need to beat Kamu, or else you're going to just lose one of them. I think they could shake up the entire game. And so even a player like that who had no pregame knowledge, you gave him 6 weeks of runway to learn the game, a la Jag, who is one of the worst players of all time, was still trusting Saria after she evicted him, but then wins some power, realizes how to play the game, and just plays bully ball down to the end of the game. You don't want to see that for Yash and Kamu. And this is kind of that last chance of like, take a shot at them now where the HOH numbers are still bigger to where they can't really trade off the competition wins. But if you let Haley, Yash, and Kamu stay to the end, they're, really giving Matt, Jag, and Bowie Jane.
Yeah, Yeah, I was just watching Terran's update this morning, and he was saying how Yash and Kamu were like above and beyond the top two best performers in the comps this season so far, and Barrett's number three actually, surprisingly, even though he hasn't actually won anything, just average placement wise, he's third best right now. So I think getting out Yash this week would be just open up those competitions wide open to other people to be able to win it, because if they don't get him out now, it's going to be really, really hard to do so in the future, I think. So I 100% agree. If he's on that block this week, if it's him versus Haley, you got to get out Yash. Or if it's him versus anyone, of course. But I think that's the only one where maybe it would be questionable. But I think sorry, Kamu, not Yash. But you have to get out Kamu this week if you have the chance.
And every week.
And yeah, of course. But before we get into kind of just the highlights of the last week that don't necessarily involve Drew directly, got to get your thoughts on Drew Liddy, Melodrew, whatever we're calling them. Do you think that this has any legs outside of this game potentially?
Look, I mean, I don't have any insider information that, the rest of the fans don't have. Like, there's clearly something there in terms of they get along very well. I think this situation has been even more isolating for Melody than it has Drew, because at least Drew's had secret alliances, had really felt like he was in the mix. Melody has really felt on the bottom, like she has absolutely nobody. And so that just is going to bond people naturally closer. Now, I think that the extenuating circumstances at play are, one, Melody clearly has feelings for somebody back home, and it's probably something mixed because she's still, like very clearly like hang out with Drew a ton, and that's very flirty, but she's shouting him out in like every single, voting confessional as well. And so I don't think, just from that perspective, that we will really ever see Drew and Melody like sleep in the same bed or kiss or anything like that. And then on Drew's front, like he had very recently gotten out of a long-term relationship. I know, talking to him before the game, that he was saying that like flirting is going to be part of his toolkit of things that he can use, but really being seen as a duo with somebody could be very bad for him, especially in this exact scenario where they put them on the block together and then he's the bigger threat and he's going to go home. So I do think that there's a bit of distancing on his part as well from the strategic lens. Ultimately, for Drew Liddy, we're just going to have to see how it goes outside of the house. I know Drew has zero interest in doing a long distance relationship with someone in Colorado, but theoretically, if she moved to LA or San Diego and they were closer, maybe they, feelings could be more genuine outside the house. She also has to figure out if she's dating the guy back home, so that's probably, a big thing to figure out. Really, what I would say is don't get your hopes up that we're going to ever see anything too interesting on this season, although I expect more flirting, more segments, but nothing ever really like satisfying the people that really want them to go all in and, be boyfriend and girlfriend.
Sure. All right, there you have it. Well, let's get into then the highlights from this past week. So we'll rewind for a little bit before this week. Just everything the highlights that happened since the last time that we talked on the episodes, at least, because some of this had happened on the feeds already. But we left off where Lala nominated Barrett, Haley, and Chuck for eviction. Haley and Chuck, shocked and blindsided by this. Chuck goes to talk to Lala, and he tells her that nobody respects her game, that he says in the DR that Lala's game disgusts him. JT, what did you think of just Chuck's seemingly just like very intense dislike for Lala and the game that she played, seemingly just because she nominated him?
I mean, tell me the last time somebody with a cowboy hat has been a good casting choice, and I will, give Chuck the time of day. It is actually unreal how this casting choice is actually the worst player of every season. Like,
Yeah.
just from Chuck to Riley to Cameron, like they all are just
Beast Mode
insufferable.
Cowboy?
Beast Mode Cowboy, of course. I cannot believe they let him play 2 Survivor seasons. They just, the history goes on and on. Maybe if someone can name their top 3 favorite Chuck moments, and not ones that we were dunking on him, but ones that he actually did, then I could really, get into why, maybe he could be correct, but I'm gonna guess that you don't have any favorite Chuck moments because he was not on the episodes, because he was boring, because ultimately he was bad casting. It is unreal how casting, I swear, like half the people I know in the Big Brother community are far more funny and interesting than Chuck. And yet we see every season these people continuing to get cast. I pledge now that if I get on Big Brother 29, I will put up the insufferable men who give us nothing as well.
Thank you, JT. In advance, we appreciate your service for doing that. Well, Haley, D, and Angela then have a conversation in the backyard about the vote flip from the week before. Now, this conversation was one that I believe we did not see on the feeds, but was talked about quite a bit because once D leaves, the only thing that we hear Angela say to Haley is that if people don't want to admit this one thing, let it go. Now, Haley then later makes more claims about what Angela said, which I think a lot of us thought, like, did she say this? Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. But it does seem like from what we saw, which again, we didn't see it all. It certainly could have been edited out, but Angela did not actually say anything to the effect of trust your gut to Haley.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. This is one thing I talked with Drew about the game before, is you need to have, as a Big Brother player, but really playing any social strategy game, a good read of the board of which information is out there and which information is essentially out there. And the information that Dee and Angela flipped was essentially out there. Now, they didn't admit it, but let's just be real. They were always going to find out who the 3 votes were, especially because way too many people had the information. And so one thing I talked to Drew about is have people understand, like, look at what people understand and give them information that is going to validate their understanding of the game. And we talked about this from like a perspective of like a Drew and Melody situation where people see them together all the time. If people are asking you like, hey, like, do you have any game relationship with Melody, and you try to lie about it, they already know, they already see you together. Honestly, even if you don't, and Drew and Melody don't, I believe, do they have a final 2? I can't remember.
I don't
If
think
they do,
officially, no,
it's
not that I've
clearly
seen.
fake because she hasn't told about the crossovers. But you still want
Oh
to
my God, that's
validate
crazy.
people being
Wow.
like you got to validate that people see you and Melody together, and you got to be like, yeah, she's with me, and if she's with me, then that means she's with you. That's how you make yourself seem like a valuable ally. If instead you're like, no, actually, I don't even like Melody, and she's also coming after you, and I think that she needs to go soon, then that doesn't really fit with what they're thinking. And so they're like, okay, Drew's probably lying about wanting to get rid of Melody, and if he's lying about that, then what else am I going to lie about? And all of this to say, Angela and Dee, you have to realize that people were going to know that you flipped the vote. So the more you dig your grave, regardless, like, yeah, do I think that Haley probably mixed around some of the words that Angela said? Sure. But Haley was being gaslit the entire time that Angela and Dee flipped on them, and she realized it because none of these people are good enough liars, and ultimately the truth was going to come out. And so I'm not bothered by Haley being like, yeah, like, you basically confirmed that you and Dee had flipped, and then she's like, oh, I would never do that to Dee. And it's like, why are we even arguing about this? This should have not even been an issue in the first place.
Yeah, it is kind of wild to me that like Angela ended up as the victim of this somehow to a large majority of the house, because I agree with you that like if I saw Angela's like huge reaction to Haley during that fight, I would have thought, yeah, clearly she's overcompensating for the fact that she did say this and she did rat out D. So I certainly would have thought that, and I think that I agree with you. Like if the vote had been 7-4 or 6-5 or whatever, like if it wasn't so like there was only 3 spots here, Devin's admitted to one right away, so that only leaves 2 spots. Like I agree that I don't know if it's worth it to like just try to pretend this to maybe to certain people, sure, but like not to people who are potentially going to be in a power quite a bit this season. And I think that it would have been very beneficial to them to especially let Kamu know right away, just because he's so likely to win an HOH sometime in the next couple of weeks that it's like, why completely ruin your relationship with him for this that he's probably going to assume anyways. And with Haley, kind of the same thing. Like, I think that it would have been more beneficial to just come up with an excuse as to why you did it rather than saying that you didn't even do it.
Yeah, and going back to the Angela point as well of like how does she become the victim? And I mean this in all sincerity, but Angela has an uncanny ability to get into these fights with the most insufferable people in the house. And I'm
Yeah.
not even joking. Like you think about it, like she did it to Matt Hardman, but everyone in that house wanted Matt to be the first boot, and it made Angela feel more sympathetic because it's like, okay, well, I also don't like Matt. So even if I don't agree with everything you're saying, I agree with the gist of let's just target him and get him out in the first week. Same with Lisa in Big Brother 26 in the second week. She was, crashing out on Lisa and they were fighting, and people were also like, but I don't like Lisa. And so I am very happy to get on board with this. And so similarly with Haley has dug her own grave in a million different ways on this cast. And it might cost her game this week when her real allies, the only people who should want to keep her in the house, nominated her and might not use the veto on her. And it's just because she's put herself in a position where nobody likes her. And she's so annoying to be around, zero self-awareness, that when Angela is crashing out and it is fully in the wrong. I mean, let's just be clear. Like, I'm not a Haley stan, but Haley was completely wronged by Angela, would have taken her to the end and was just blindsided for no reason and then yelled at because she didn't accept Angela's apology, question mark. Like, the Angela is completely in the wrong, but everybody is so biased against Haley, and they have Angela as part of their power structure, and they don't see Haley as a part of it, that they just twist the narrative in their minds of like, oh, Haley's being a bully again, Haley's being insufferable again, so I guess I'm just going to side with Angela, even if I don't agree with how she was yelling at Haley. I agree with the general vibe of I don't like you, and so
Right.
somehow it has worked. I actually think that Drew will be like the person that if she really does crash out on it will fall apart because people actually like Drew. I'm trying to think in 26 if she really had one of these big meltdowns on a popular player in the house, and I don't think she did, because I don't think she really blew up on Quinn. She never blew up on Chelsea. Even Tucker she like flipped on, but it wasn't like a fight, and they also wanted Tucker out at the time. I think it was really just Matt and Lisa that I can picture as like
Yeah.
the big moments. I love a game like Big Brother because you have to be so intentional about every single move that you make, and you have to make a calculated strike against the people in power and really take them all out in one fell swoop. You can't just be like throwing out the people's names when you're not the HOH, because that's how you get yourself as the perpetual pawn always on the block, which Angela is more than familiar with. But for the most part this season, she has been relatively tame. I'm actually shocked that this week she's been completely tame as well. You would have imagined that like being on the block would have completely set her off. Maybe we'll see it if like, they try to take out Kamu, then Kamu wins the blockbuster, then Kamu wins the HOH, and then you just see like a full crash out on Kamu where, trust me, like I'm going to be the first one cheering her on, but it's probably going to be again for them flipping on Kamu. And it's like, of course he's going to start to nominate you. But I mean, look, that's why Angela is there. It's because she, provides the drama. And I've been, waiting for like the full blow up, and we kind of got it against Haley, but I'd love to, see it against Kamu as well.
Yeah, yeah. I'm so glad Angela was here this season, and I think for the first few weeks we said like, when is Angela gonna Angela? And then finally that moment came this week when so to go back just a little bit before that though, so Angela starts to get paranoid the next morning that she people are gonna find out about her vote. So she tearfully confesses this to Haley and Kamu. Well, Haley tells Chuck about it as well. Kamu doesn't seem to necessarily be as pissed as Haley and Chuck are. I guess because he had already, found his footing in the game right back. And she also encourages Dee to confess to her vote, but Dee only decides to tell Kamu like she had already planned on doing. She does not tell Haley or Chuck. What did you think about Dee's decision of kind of really confiding everything in Kamu, but really leaving Haley and Chuck out of it?
I think that what this has made me realize, and I, had learned this a bit from watching Suri play as well, but like we idolize these Survivor players who are so benefited by an edit that they seem to be playing such an infallible game. There was, a pretty general consensus that Dee was the best player of the new era, and if you said otherwise, you were in the minority. And I think that what we've really been able to learn from this season is that, it's far more complicated than that. To play, a truly like flawless game is almost impossible, and every winner has to get lucky. And I say all of this because obviously all of this play by Dee was completely unnecessary. Entirely the reason she's on the block is voting voting out Lyric when she never had to, and she could have just voted out Melody, or she could have just told the red corner that she's with them, and they all would have been fine. And I think that, similarly, D and Devins are having to like use this Diamond Power veto, and it might not even work because you have to use, the blockbusters in play and all of this stuff. And it's just all way messier than it ever needed to be because they were in such a absolutely killer position. And so I think that D absolutely should have just told them what she was doing before she voted. After she voted, she also should have just owned up to it and started to rebuild the relationships. And I think that, going honestly back to the Angela point, one of the big reasons why I think Angela was the best casting choice instead of someone like Morgan, who was, obviously heavily rumored, she had almost won the last season, is Morgan's a way better player than Angela. And as much as we like to see the great players do great things, way more often than not, we actually just see the great players completely steamroll to the end, and then we crown them in a win, or we crown them in, a disappointing loss like we did to Paul, but we had to wait all summer to do it. And I'm thinking of someone like Morgan. If she was in this house instead of Angela, they would have just steamrolled because now she's better at comp. She knows what she's doing. She's not blowing up a vote and, putting Kamu on the outs. And then you probably we would see the red corner way more intact. Whereas when you put someone like an Angela on the cast, she already has the downside of being, just auto loss in like a third of the comps. And, generally like competition ability is directly correlated to the amount of power you have in the game. But also she's just generally distrustful of her allies. And I think that Angela's a huge reason why, because so much of this like Survivor, these Survivor players are trying to play Survivor in a Big Brother house. And for the most part, it works, but there's a lot of things in Big Brother that are very different than Survivor. And they're, falling into the same traps that I think that, they really don't need to be. I would imagine that if there was a better Big Brother player in that house, they could have really taught Devins and D how to play the game even more effectively than they are, instead of D and Devins kind of teaching Angela how to dominate a game, and they're dominating in the least optimal way possible.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on bringing like just a couple of returnees back, like, having Angela, having a couple Survivor people on a season that is primarily new players versus waiting to cast them like for season 30 when potentially they might have a full all-star cast? Do you think that we're like wasting Angela here?
Probably not, because I think we have to just like accept the reality of shows like this, that there isn't really a waste, because you have to take the opportunities that are in front of you. Like, you
Yeah,
never know like what could be going on in Angela's life. You never know if she's like still going to want to do it, or if she has like an even better opportunity with maybe like, the Traders 5 is casting, and Angela would have been
sure.
one of their first picks, and then Angela, her contract doesn't allow her to go back on Big Brother. I would imagine that if I was a producer of these shows, I would always be thinking like, don't wait too long, especially with Big Brothers famously being incredibly stingy. Like, you can't just bank on getting your legendary players back if you don't want to pay legendary prices. And so I think that overall, if I from a producer standpoint, you just bring them back when you can. Now, from a fan standpoint, there's been a lot of talk of like, we're done with vets. It's not fun to see them steamroll, especially in a season where they're given the first HOH and then given the first 3 powers, because obviously they were going to get it. I think that I would never do those twists again. And generally, I think the new player casts are just more like kind of interesting to watch, because the vets are such a force. And like, sometimes it works out with Rachel Riley, where it kind of struck the perfect balance of like, yeah, she was like a legendary player, but they were still kind of targeting her. And so it wasn't just a free ride, because like the last thing I want to see is Big Brother 19 again. And it easily could have turned into that this season if Angela, D, and Devins were playing a little better. So overall, I think that I get why they do these, celebrity castings. I think one of my favorite Big Brother moments ever was seeing Suri in that kitchen. And I was so excited that, I was going to get to see Suri play live, and it, for the most part lived up to expectations. So like, I can't, on the other hand, now when I got to see like Drew be so disadvantaged by having all these veteran players, be like, oh, well, I don't like it when it doesn't benefit me, and I like it when I get to see Suri. But overall, I think that like Big Brother should just commit. If you want to do a Survivor season, I think it would be one of the best seasons ever if you did like 8 Survivor players and 8 Big Brother players. But like, we don't need to cast like the 14 randoms. And then on the other hand, it's like, if you want a D, Devins, Angela season, just commit to having an all-star cast. Don't make like, Barrett and Drew, these fans who have been waiting their entire lives to play, be second, be background characters in their own season.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that it worked last season, and in large part, I think because Rachel isn't the type to just kind of lead a cult like Paul was. And she's a very divisive personality that I think isn't going to necessarily lend itself to just like a steamroll to the end. And they didn't really give her that much of an advantage. She was safe the first week, but then after that, like she was just as vulnerable as everyone else every other week. And so that was so made it even more impressive in the fact that she was able to make it as far as she did and was never nominated the whole season. But this season, yeah, I love seeing. I think that bringing Dean Devons onto this season was a great move because they're not going to be on an all-star season, of course. So like this is kind of the only opportunity that they would have where it's a little twist like this, unless you make it all Survivor players or all former reality TV players of some sort. So I think it was great to have them. Yeah, and I think that bringing Angela on is a little bit of a firecracker, or someone who's going to blow up the alliance and make it not a steamroll. I think I completely understand why they did it the way they did, but I agree. Like the next All Star season, unless they just bring Angela back again 2 years later, whenever they do it, like I'm gonna miss her and wish like, it would have been really interesting to see what she would have been like on a season of full returnees.
And we always can just do that. Yeah, the real
Right.
thing is that there are no rules, and if you want Angela
Hmm.
back every season, you can just do it.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
we'll see when the next All Star season comes around. But I totally get what you're saying, and I think that it will be a miss to not get to see Angela interact with like so many of our favorite players.
Yeah.
But I mean, Janelle played 4 times. I don't see why Angela can't play
Why
3.
not? Yeah, exactly. Well, then to just kind of, and we've talked a little bit about this already, but just to kind of to continue telling a cohesive story here, Dee also tells Kamu about her power in an effort to regain his trust, which seemingly, well, now we know maybe not so true now, but at the time it seemed to really work and got him to trust her again. Haley and Chuck then interrupt their conversation. Haley tells Dee that Angela threw her under the bus. Seemingly, that is a lie. And then they bring Angela and Yash into the room so they can all clear the air. Angela and Haley argue back and forth, and Angela explodes when Haley accuses her of saying, "Trust your gut," insinuating that Dee was the other vote. We didn't see most of like the really big part of this fight on the feeds. What did you think watching it on the episode? Did it live up to expectations?
I mean, I think it definitely did. I also liked when Pluto TV like put out the uncensored
Uncensored,
clips, which
yeah.
just was so funny. I think that like this is what you want to see from Big Brother. I'm a big fan of the challenge. I know Drew is as well, and so I've been really watching as the challenge has shifted from a show of like mostly drama to like casting more and more ex athletes and people who are
Yeah.
just so physically dominant. And I'm watching it and I'm like, well, what do we want the show to become? Because do we want it to just, and I'm talking from the challenge standpoint, be like the biggest, like most physical, like we're going to get the craziest hall brawls, but we're not really getting these massive personalities, which I think is what the challenge has been really built on. Because that's the way we've been seeing the show go. And going back to Big Brother, is it optimal gameplay to crash out on Haley and curse her out and use so many expletives that we can't, put it in the episode? No, but it's so much more fun than getting, a really like getting a Chelsea back in the house, who Chelsea would not have even had the fight because she would have already gaslit Haley into thinking it was her fault that she flipped, and now she has forgiven Haley for her own flip, and that now Haley can repay the favor by not nominating her. And while I think it's like super interesting gameplay to get to see, a real legend at work like we got to see in season 26, on the other hand, it's like so frustrating to get to watch, as Mackenzie nominates Leah and like the rest of the hope of the season of not just crowning Chelsea was gone. You don't really want to see now, like theoretically, like my dream and like many Big Brother fans is that they just shell out the cash for like the greatest of all time season. And we get to see, so many of the best players that it's like, it's not going to work on each other, doing
Mhm.
these really crazy plays. But yeah, the question of like, do you want like maximum gameplay or is some level of bad gameplay actually better TV? I think is something that the casting producers continue to question. And I'll always be on the side of if you look at the favorite players, it's never the Lyrics or the Chucks, who were just people who had no idea what was going on. It's so rare to find the Zach Rants of somebody who just came in, no idea, and was such a fun character. It's far more likely that the people who are the fan favorites are the Dan Gieslings, or, like Dr. Will is such a good character that you can't really put him in there. But like the best winners are the people that the fans love the most, and it's because it's so fun to get to watch good gameplay, um in certain lenses. I mean, even like Derek Levasseur, who has famously played one of the most boring winning games, even if it was the most impressive, has so many fans. And like, you'll talk to like my aunt, the one I was saying that got me into it, that's her favorite player of all time because he's so smart, and they're putting him back on the shows. I don't know why they aren't casting more for people who like actually know what they're doing, but I can admit in this one scenario that having Angela as a worse player made for better TV.
100%. Yeah. I've been saying, in terms of like a legend season, I think what they should do is just do it at the length of like a celebrity Big Brother season, and just do it, put it on in the winter or the fall or whatever, and just have it be a month long. And that way, people who have kids and whatever who wouldn't be able to do a full season, I think you get everybody you want basically for the most part. And it's just a short season. If it ends up being a little bit of a flop, at least it was short.
Yeah, I've like thought of it. The issue is like the logistics of it all, because the Big Brother week format like makes sense in terms of airing episodes, but if you're going to do it in 30 days, then are we having like Tuesdays in eviction, Thursdays in eviction, and Sundays in eviction? Like, it's hard to like actually map it out, because the worst
Yeah.
case scenario you could do is no live feeds. Like, I don't, if there's no live feeds, I don't want it. And because you can do the evictions, whenever you want, if there's no live feeds, and then you can edit it together. So I think that would be like the biggest logistical issue that Big Brother would have to figure out. But I totally agree. Like, we're leaving gold on the table every season that we're not doing it. It just like makes it less and less likely it ever happens.
Yeah.
And like, whatever it takes, I know these shows make so much money. Like, just pay Dan Giesling $300,000 for a month, and he'll do it.
100%. Yeah, I mean he's doing Destination X. I think he'll do Celebrity or Big Brother or Legend season or whatever it ends up being if you pay him the right amount of money.
Yes.
So, let's talk about the FAP Alliance for a bit, because it finally made air on the show. Drew, Barrett, Melody, and Mallory, and now what we are shown that it stands for is For the American People. We all know that that is not exactly the case, or wasn't originally, and they made him change it. But what do you think of just this alliance as a whole for Drew and the name of it?
I mean, it's so Drew. Like, I'm not even joking. Like, I know the origins of the tool shed, and like, even though I've not gotten my shout out on the show, that was my shout out, because Drew and I, shortly after Beast Games, we were thinking of like the dumbest alliance names we could come up with. And we came up with the tool shed because that would imply that everyone in there are the tools. And then within the tool shed, you could have the handyman alliance. And the funniest part was that like, we were like, talking about it before the season, and we were like, it's probably not smart to create the tool shed, because everyone will know it's so obviously fake that it will blow up your game by just even suggesting that you could have the handyman or the tool shed. But yet he did it because it would be super stupid and that people would make fun of it. So I am not surprised at all that Drew has made the FAP Alliance. I thought it was incredibly funny, and it's like very clear. I think they're starting to learn, especially after hopefully Drew gets the last time capsule, that the people they're rooting for is this alliance, and it'll lock them in even further. So, love the FAP Alliance. I think it's great for Drew, especially if we can keep this tenuous like circumstance where Barrett and Mallory and Melody seem to be bigger targets than Drew. If that's the case, I think Drew actually, are we talking about Drew as the winner of this game? Because if he's going to be the last one targeted, he will be there in the end, and then he probably will have the people on the jury that like him. We start to then have to question like, who can Drew beat in a jury vote, which is so hazy because it's too early. But for now, I think that it's the biggest asset to his game is the fact that he has options outside of the icons who clearly he has a expiration date with.
Yeah. Well, then we get to the veto competition, and Kamu wins. And Haley and Chuck, of course, think that he's going to use the veto on one of them, but Kamu has other plans. He has talked with Lala and Taylor and decided that he is not going to use the veto. He tells Chuck and Haley this, and they are confused and hurt. He kind of uses the fact that Lala told him that she's gonna put up Devin, so they're gonna have an alliance member go home either way. I don't know that I completely understand how that's supposed to make Chuck and Haley feel better, but I guess it doesn't really matter because one of them is going home regardless. But he does not end up using the veto there. Do you think that was the right move for Kamu?
So I think that when we like look at these binaries of like right move, wrong move, it implies a static board. And it's one thing I always like to talk about whenever I play the games is like one of my, strengths as a player, I feel like, is I can really see the board. And what I mean is like see where people are lying strategically. But we have to remember, as many metaphors as people have and will continue to make about this game being chess, it's not chess, because in chess you have defined pieces that have defined moves, and therefore, each of us have an equal amount of pieces. But in Big Brother, the metaphor I loved when I heard it is it's like you can just look at the pieces and be like, actually, that's my piece now. Chelsea can go and right before the jury be like, wait, I actually realized I've been trying to get Mackenzie out for weeks, but she's not the person I need out. She's my most valuable asset, and just grabs that piece and picks it up. And that's what we really got to see with Kamu, is he was so flexible that he, talked himself out of a position, picks up Taylor and Lala as allies, and really locks in Yash and throws away Haley and Chuck. But if you're Kamu, why stop there? I think at the point at which you're fully safe, if you can go to Lala and Taylor and really realize, like, the second that Kamu got this power, and Yash technically was the HOH, but like, Kamu's playing it like it's his HOH. He was already like, let's flip on the icons, let's do D, let's do Devins, blah blah blah. You could have done it last week, and you could have taken Chuck off the block. You could have talked Lala into doing D, and then theoretically you might have the numbers if Barrett or D are on the block, and we know that Haley probably wins that blockbuster. That was a much better shot for Kamu to take than Chuck, who really, like, if you use the veto on Chuck, like, yeah, he was kind of out on Kamu, but he's all the way back in if you use that veto on him. And I think for Kamu, who low-key might be one of the most twist-screw players ever, I mean, we can like admit that even when we say we're so happy that finally the most twist-screwed player is the person we were rooting against, not the person we were rooting for. I look back to that week as like a huge mistake of like, you have the power, but you chose not to use it because you wanted to humble yourself and you wanted to look like you're cutting your allies. But Big Brother is not a give and take type of game. It's a take and take type of game. You always use the power when you have it. I think Kamu could have talked his way into it. And I think Taylor and Lala, especially if they're about to get blindsided this week and lose Kamu, might be like, damn, I really wish we had Chuck in this game instead of Barrett. So certainly a mistake from my point of view. I think he could have made it work, but I don't think you make the move of let Chuck go and then you immediately go and target the vets. Right. I think that it's just, you're giving up too much and you're not receiving anything.
Yeah, it's like, just, you have to finish the job. If you're gonna go for it fully. And it feels like he kind of did a little bit of a half-ass measure and went for it, but then now trying to still repair things with Haley and go in a different direction now. So I agree with that. But as the weeks goes on, there's more conversations that start to happen about flipping the Haley versus Chuck vote, because at first Haley was going to be the target here, but then throughout the week there's more conversations that maybe we were going to flip that. And then just like last week, just hours before the eviction, D is able to successfully flip that vote, which does not end up actually mattering because it does not end up being the two of them on the block there. But yeah, D once again just got bored and decided to cause chaos. What do you think of D trying to do this a second week in a row?
I mean, arguably, you can say D is in the position she's in now because she flipped the vote, because it just, again, proved to Kamu and Yash that, like, D's going to do whatever she wants and it might not be beneficial to you. And it just didn't matter. Like, Chuck and Haley were basically the same player. Like, at the very least, like, come on, we got to go back to Survivor 101, make people think that this is their idea. Remember when we did that to Haley that one time? Like, you got to, maybe it won't work on Yash and Kamu, who are better players, but you got to not use all of this social capital for nothing. Like, Haley and Chuck, if you were so afraid of Chuck, just go talk to Chuck and go make some deals with Chuck. It's not that hard. Literally no one's talking to him. So I think that in these games, especially when we were talking about, casting and all these people who like don't know what they're doing, there's like 5 people each season who know what they're doing, and then they all figure out each other, and they have to realize, are we going to lock in or are we going to take each other out? Because when I'm the only player who knows what they're doing left, I'm going to completely run this game. And I think that D just tipped her hand a little bit too much, and is now paying the price for it. And, I'm happy because Drew's like the biggest benefactor of D, getting her entire game blown up. But in the other hand, it's like I want to, see everybody playing their best possible game. So, long-winded way of saying no, obviously it wasn't the right move, and D losing the season might just be because she tried to flip it on Chuck.
Yeah. And I don't even know that after this game she would be too upset about it, because I think a lot of it is just her wanting to have fun and getting bored and just wanting to make things exciting, and that certainly worked. In that regard, she got what she wanted out of it. So I think she would, even if it ends up being the detriment of her game, I think she wouldn't be too upset about it. But Haley ends up winning the blockbuster, leaving Chuck and Barrett on the block, and Chuck is evicted by a vote of 9-1, as expected. We've talked enough about Chuck's game. I don't think we need to go into too much detail there. But going, what? Sorry.
It might be the last time anyone talks about Chuck's game ever because he's so irrelevant. And so you know what, you got your 15 minutes, and now let's move on with the game.
Chuck time is over. But then Yash wins the next HOH, and it was a knockout competition. Now, full disclosure, we're recording this before watching Sunday's episode, so we have not seen this actually play out, but apparently Dee and Devins picked each other multiple times. I don't know how or why that happened. We will, I guess, find out when we watch the episode, but that seems to be a huge mistake that they're paying for now.
Just only cost them the Diamond Power veto, small price.
Yeah, small potatoes. But Yash wins this, so he wants to go after the icons, and he is upset about being left out of yet another vote flip. Understandably, that mistake from D there. D and Devins think they're fine. They're celebrating. Barrett tries to warn them, though, that they might be in trouble because just a couple days before that, he was in a room with Lala, Yash, Drew, Melody, and Mallory, where they were discussing targeting the icons. Yash was fully on board for it, so it does seem like he is trying to tell them, hey, y'all might be in trouble here, which I think, Barrett, maybe hasn't been doing enough in this game, but I think this was a good move for him to let Dee and Devins know this.
It was at least a fine move. I think Barrett's big issue is and something I remember talking to Drew about is that in Big Brother, one of the big currencies you have is time. You only have so much time in the day to be making these relationships. But the biggest issue is that all of the players don't realize they don't use the time. They just sit around all day. They just have so much fun. So Barrett continues to invest in the relationships he already has. Dee and Devins cannot trust Barrett more than they do. They're already not going to take him out. Honestly, I think there's a chance that they would take out Angela before they took out Barrett. So he doesn't I agree, give your allies the heads up, but with more selfish players, they would use that to get Barrett on the block instead of them. There's nothing about this game is changing with Barrett. When you know what would change something, go spend 4 hours with Taylor. Go be Taylor's best friend for the day. That would do wonders for Barrett's game. But he just is continuing to kind of sit and play this more what's happened has happened. I can't, change the alliances. I just have to continue to work with the people that I'm with. That's not how this game works. And I expect more from a super fan, because you only get the shot one time to really play these games for sure if you really are on this cast. And I think that Barrett is going to be someone who might look back and be like, dang, there's so many more things that I could do. And I think that everyone is always guilty of like not doing enough for the most part. It's rare that we get the Frenchie of like, you know, maybe you could have done a little less. But
the other extreme.
Drew's still doing a lot. Like, you know, Yash and Kamu are talking about Drew as like the crucial vote that they have, and it's keeping him entirely safe this week. Whereas Barrett is so likely to be a renom if, you know, the veto is going to be used. And it's just because he puts the time in with those players. It's something that I'm going to like really focus on when I inevitably play the game is like, think of the people that you're not with and then go try to be with them. Go, you know, talk to them about their family if they won't talk to you about strategy, because the more they like you, the more willing they will be to work with you.
Yeah. Well, then let's talk about the bribe power, because that ends up being a big part of the last few days here, because Dee tries to use it to get Yash to not nominate her and Angela. He refuses. She then counters with keeping just her off the block, which he still refuses. There may have been other bribes attempted as well, but they were all refused. And this seems to really put Dee in even a worse spot potentially than before she tried this, because Yash does not like how this conversation went. He says that she didn't hug him on the way out. He does not feel good about it. Kamu also pushes really hard for Dee to be the target this week, so it feels like this went from maybe potentially Angela being the target to now Dee is fully the target. What do you think of Dee using her bribe power in this way and Yash not accepting it?
Like I said, we can learn something from every single player. And I think what I've really been able to learn from Dee is she is one of the best players of all time from playing from a good position. And it's how we saw her win Survivor 45, where she really just locked in with her allies. And she had her two people in Austin and Julie who just weren't willing to make the moves that had to be done to take out the biggest threat. They let her get too far. They didn't put their votes on her at Final 5, which both could have switched the game. And then at Final 4, she wins that final immunity, and she would have had a chance at Fire, and she just wins the game. But what we're seeing now is the people that she's not very good with, she's actually, not a great player, and we can just admit that. One of the crazy things about Beast Games is that there was a Survivor player on there, and that Survivor player was Sifu, the first Survivor player who I ever met. And we had nothing but time in Beast Games to talk, and so I got to talk to Sifu, and we talked about how Dee, at that Sean vote, put a vote on him, even though that Sean quit the game and was going home. And it was so messy for no reason. And Sifu says his biggest regret in Survivor is when he was at the voting booth, at the J Maya vote, where famously Caleb plays a shot in the dark and nullifies every single vote. Sifu was sitting there and he was like, I want to repay the favor to Dee. I want to put a vote on Dee. But he, playing the smart game, was like, well, if I'm not going to, vote Dee out, I'm not going to waste my shot on her. But he claims he was very, very close to voting Dee there, and she would have went home with one vote as one of the most robbed pre-jury players of all time, would have never got to play the challenge, would have never got to play Survivor 50, would have never got to play Big Brother, all because she throws a vote on Sifu for no reason. Yeah. Similarly here, Dee does not have that level of tact with the players who don't really mess with her. She doesn't know how to just calm down and just really give them everything they want. She has a plan, she's sticking to it, and when it doesn't work, she's a little pouty and a little, just very obvious to Yash, yeah, I'm coming for you next week. And it's why Yash turned her into the target, where I don't think she necessarily would have been the target if she had played a little more smoothly. So while I don't disagree, do everything you can to stay off the block, I think there was totally a world in which the $5,000 could have worked, especially if you had, massaged the relationship with Yash more. It's really more about how she went about it that I think really killed her game.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Yash does end up nominating Dee, Angela, and Haley for eviction, with Barrett likely as the replacement nom if need be. Yash wins Power of Veto. It was Otev, and he talks with Taylor and Kamu about pulling Haley in to work with them in the future and becoming a 4. I'm sure with Lala as well in that. And they might use the veto on Haley, they talk about, to put up Barrett in her place. But the current plan, it goes back and forth. It feels like this definitely should be the right move for them if they want to work with Haley and keep her safe. But it seems like at the end of the night last night, the current plan is to keep the noms the same. What do you think of this plan and discussion? Do you feel like it's going to change today in the next 24 hours before the ceremony, or do you think that this is going to stay the same?
Look, obviously as a Drew fan, I hope that it doesn't change, but also as a Big Brother fan, I think that at the very least, if Kamu and Yash make the idiotic move of letting Haley stay on the block with all the information that they have, that nobody really likes Haley and that she's likely going to be voted out if she stays on the block. If they make that mistake, I'm going to feel way less bad about Kamu being arguably one of the most twist screw players of the game ever, where his number one ally, he goes out on his HOH from a power that was basically rigged for Devins in the first place. Because you let Haley stay up there, at the very least on your way out, you were making just an idiotic mistake. But clearly you have to use the veto on Haley. Like we said, there are no half measures in Big Brother, really. And, they don't know that they should do this, but they should know. that they should just take Haley off and put Devins up. Devins has made it clear that he is with D and that you're going to piss him off and making the move to take her out. So why not just go full throttle anyways and put him up? And this is, obviously, like, you can't take out the fact that we know that Devins has the Diamond Power veto. So we know if he does this, they actually can get out D. Whereas, by not putting up Devins, D is 100% safe. But even then, it just goes back to when you have power, you actually want to use it. So, I leave open the possibility that Taylor and Kamu are both somewhat good strategic minds and they might see the board by Monday. We still have a lot of time. But for now, as long as Drew continues to just play this double agent and being like, yeah, I'll vote with you, like, you have so much sway over me, they're just going to get too cocky. They're not going to want to do it. They're not going to want to burn Barrett, when they're trying to take out D anyways. And they're going to lose either Haley or Kamu. So we know that this like impending crazy Monday is coming of like the game getting blown up, Kamu getting thrown on the block. So if there's any whispers about it, which there probably won't be because Devins isn't even telling Drew and Barrett that he's going to use the Diamond Power veto, then it's probably fine. But there's so much that could change because really, like, so many people can go home this week dependent on if the veto is used by Yosh and what that means for who Devins would potentially put up. But for now, it is feeling like Haley and Kamu are the best bets because typically I feel like when they make a decision, they kind of stick with it.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that they even discussed using it on Angela was wild yesterday. I don't think that's going to end up happening, but it was that thought was like, oh my God, please do that. How great would that be? But Devins does plan to use the Diamond Power veto on D. There's talk about maybe her using the bribe so that he can use that as the excuse as to why he's doing that. But they're playing right now, nominate Kamu. Of course, that could change if the regular veto is used. But they're playing right now, blow up Kamu's game, declare war on the other side of the house. I personally, if that happens, I cannot wait for Monday veto meeting right away. I hope they put up the feeds right away because it's going to be some great feeds.
Let's go a step further. Why not even just put the veto meeting on the feeds? Like, I don't know why this is a rule that it can't be on there.
Please, just do it like that crazy nomination ceremony where the feeds came back like as it was ending. I think that I'll take that. But very excited to see what happens. We will certainly cover that all next week. But JT, last before we go here, we ask all of our guests this year. We at the end of the year we will be doing our Chatty Awards ceremony, where we will be honoring the best and worst reality shows of 2026. And this year we are adding a guest choice nomination, a guest choice category. So each guest that we have, we are asking to give us a nominee for best reality star of the year, or whatever criteria you want to use. Any show that you've watched this year, to just nominate somebody who you feel like was a standout. And then if anyone gets the most votes, they'll automatically win. If not, Molly and I will come up with a winner based on the nominees. Who would you like to nominate for that?
Yeah, I think this is a good question. Like I said, I'm quite the reality historian. Going through all the seasons I've watched. I've watched the 2 Big Brother seasons. I've watched 2 Survivor seasons. The Big Brother season. I watched Australian Survivor. I watched The Traitors this year. Obviously, I'm watching Big Brother. And I think that ultimately this year for me will be defined by one person in reality TV. And so I think it is only fair that I nominate the Andrew Campbell, the person who got me on this podcast in the first place. I think it would be quite disrespectful to not nominate him as the reality star of the year. And now, do I think he's earned it to this point? Yes, because he's got me on this podcast. But if I wasn't on this podcast, would I nominate him? Probably not. But this is a little bit of projection, we haven't seen, this little rap floater, younger guy who people didn't really like, but were forced to work with. And if he's around for another 5 to 7 weeks, which it looks like he easily could be, I think that he has so much more game to play. So, hats off to my good friend, Drew. I don't know if you're going to be able to take this one home, but, the fact that you're even going to be in the conversations with players likely Sari and, many other legends, maybe this can be your year.
I fully support it. I support it. Well, JT, thank you so much for joining me today. This was so much fun. Where can our listeners find you? Anything you want to plug here?
Yeah, well, look, I'm not here to, be famous. Like, I'm not going on these podcasts because I particularly want a following, but it has been such a fun project for me to run Drew's Instagram. So I would say, please, come follow there. We have fun edits. Feel free to DM me. If you made it this far in the podcast, I will certainly DM you back if you reach out to the Drew account. So yeah, feel free to, figure out what we're doing there. And, if you listen to me this far, I think you would really love playing, one of these live reality games, one of the online reality games. So, check out the Live Reality Games Instagram account. I'm not affiliated with them, but that's how I found a lot of, the friends that I made through that account. And if not, there's certainly some, Discord options if there's nothing in your area. So go play some of those, go make some Big Brother friends. And, I hope to see you guys on Big Brother 29. Who knows? Maybe next time I'm back on the podcast, it'll be my winner exit interview.
Oh my gosh, please do. I will be rooting for you all the way, no matter what show it is. I'm sure you will wind up on something you absolutely should. I think you would do amazing. Well, thank you guys so much for watching or listening. Be sure to follow us at Let's Chat Reality on all social media and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. So we will be back to chat more Big Brother next week. Bye, everyone.